Just give me a buzz. Lean on me, yeah. When you're not strong, and I'll be your friend.
And we are back. What an amazing time with Malcolm Larry. That was amazing. And now we're going to shift over more to deepen our knowledge in mindfulness with what I say is the corporate brain and the heart. Not hippie, actually. I define him as a man of a lot of knowledge with facts behind him. My friend, my mindfulness sensei, Kevin Reeder. And before I leave over to him to explain this to us, I will just tell a little bit about my journey, because it's important to understand to how I came in contact with Kevin and why this is so important in my life. So you could say like my journey in life started like I was born in Chile, and we came as refugees to Sweden when I was 5. And my parents very academical. They thought that if we lived only with Swedes, then we would integrate better. Now, they didn't calculate in their academic calculation how that would affect me, because I couldn't hide anymore. I was the blackhead kid, as they said, with not so many, I would say. Like, so it was horrible. Like, racism in those times was beyond what it is today. I would say much more terrible. So what I did is that I discovered the library. That was like my haven. I loved the library so much, and I read so many books that I even read all the children books in the children department, and I moved on to discover like the whole world, actually, that I could escape from all these haters, bullies, that or people that did me, like that harmed me, in this safe haven, and I explored the world. So that was a thank you to all the bullies today. I would say you propelled me to who I am today. That's the thing. Like, you gave me the gift that I have today, thanks to all these books that I read already from young age, I would say. And then I went on to university in 1998, and I started a company quite quickly, and we grew, we won prizes, and for me I found my destiny and passion. It was like digital, it was building things, like living I would say, like I live my passion full out still today. Actually, I couldn't change the lifestyle after this. But what happened was that I lived my passion too much. So I did everything to avoid to sleep, to be able to work more. I even had a sofa in the company, actually, in the office, so I could like sleep in the sofa and continue working afterwards, because that was how damaged I was. This was the only thing I knew. I knew nothing else outside, like hobbies that people do. I didn't have any of that. So what happened was that after my mother died, this was like years before, I started to get yearly depressions. And during all these years in university, building a company as entrepreneur for 8 years, I still got this like yearly depression, but they were not so big. They were like maybe 1 month, and I just partied and I just ride them out, you could say. But 1 year that I had a lot of stress, a lot of things going wrong in my life, it went beyond what it was before, actually. One day I could not sleep for almost 2 weeks, and with a lot of stress around me, things was like falling down. We were hitting the third IT crash. So what happened was that I fell down to hell, like so quickly. It went in 2 days, like just feeling a depression to where I was like in a major clinical depression that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. If you ever had anxiety in life, if you never experienced an expression, like imagine losing the person you love the most, and imagine the anxiety, the sorrow that you get, multiply it like with 100, and then you can imagine doing that for every second you're awake, maybe not for 1 week, but for months. That is what the depression is, and it's one of the highest reasons that people suicide, because they can't handle. It's so terrible. I don't want nobody to experience what I experienced those 8 months of my life, I can tell you. I was lucky enough that I was in an entrepreneur network that they put me in contact with Thomas Strand, my friend, life coach. I have so many beautiful things to say about Thomas because he saved my life actually. He had done a similar journey as me, so he could guide me, to come back to where I wanted. So 8 years living in my father's sofa, you could say, I became a child again. I couldn't even like get food. He had to come to the food, come and take the plate, and that's when I healed with my father because he has gone into his politics for so many years. But those months of my life, I felt like his son. Um, there are so many things that happen in our life like bad, but usually there's always something beautiful that comes out. And for me, was the healing with my father was the gift that I got from all these months in this mind hell, you could say. And what I lost was the ability to speak to people. Like people that know me, they know like I'm the center of attention. Like you can drop me in any mingle you want in the world, and I will make sure that I will talk to people. That's how I am. But after these 8 months, I lost the ability to talk to people. So I had to start 2 months with this kind of phone sales, phone interview kind of job just to learn to talk to people, actually. And after 2 months, I was back in the game. So I was I became a consultant again, like teaching teams how to build amazing teams, how to hire the best designers, engineers, and how to build amazing products. And that's what I've been doing more or less during my whole career. And that's what I love to do the most. And so I went on a journey to inner peace because during my burnout, when I was in the deepest of the depression, I asked my therapist at the time, like, am I the only entrepreneur, leader, high achiever, passionate one sitting here? He said, Eduardo, here is like the top of the cream of society, but nobody's talking. I said, like, why? She said, stigma, Eduardo. Nobody wants to talk about their failures. And that enraged me so much. So I decided there and then, on that very second, that if I can come back, I could learn from this. I would write a book. And that book is coming next year, wayofthepassionate.com. You can go to that address and you can read an article that I wrote that is more or less the book in just a mini format without all the details, you could say. So I wanted to know, like, why did this happen? Who else did it happen to? How can we prevent this? I wanted to know everything I could know, to be able to build myself up and to avoid that this would happen again. So I started to search for the book. I couldn't find it, so I decided I will write that book. And what I learned was like routines is very important in our lives. Actually, it's so underrated. And before this, I had no routines. I worked until I fall asleep in front of my computer, and I ate when I was hungry or order food to the company so I could eat and continue working because I didn't have any hobbies. I don't do what people like the people have a life outside work. I didn't like, and still today I'm struggling to having a life outside work that is not related to my passion. So I haven't still come to that, but at least I learned routines is very important. And I learned also that sleep is super, super important. It's the most underrated, I would say, antidepressive pill you can have, actually, besides training, actually, physical movement, sleeping. There's a lot of studies being done that people that are suffering from conditions, for example, that have a really good sleep hygiene can maintain themselves much healthier than people that don't have it, actually. And then another revelation that I had was that we as human, we have like this inner self and an outer self. And inner self is who you truly are. That is your nature. That is usually what people define as like, I found my destiny. But what you actually found is that you find that now you're living your inner self. Actually, that is, then you get this revelation like, oh, it was destiny. No, you started to not live your outer self, an outer self that is expectation of others from society, what should make you happy or not. The answer is inside you. So what I do today is that I try to live my inner self full out as much as possible and not try to let my outer self, like the expectation of others, be like the guidelines for how I live my life, actually. And another thing, and that I hope can pronounce it right, I usually almost never do, is cognitive behavior therapy. Was it right, Kevin?
Cognitive behavior therapy.
Like I said, Kevin is the expert. So, anyways, what it stands for is that actually the brain is a computer, more or less, that is programmable. And maybe all the things that you're doing wrong in your life that makes you have anxiety or burning out from things that you don't do is actually maybe your wrong program by your parents, by society, by friends. It could be like from everything around you. Like we're being programmed all the time, interaction with other people. So what I learned is that we can actually reprogram this computer, like our brain, but it just takes time. It can take a longer time, but it's doable. Like that's why you can quit smoking. That is what you can like maybe start to eat healthier. It just takes time. Military has done a lot of research on like behavior change, and it just takes time. Like you need to maybe repeat something like 300 times before it became something that the brain like reprogram itself that this is the new behavior. Right? So you need to have commitment, and that is something that I have in my life. I have commitment. My only problem is I have commitment when I like something. So when I don't like something, like eating more healthier, less food that I like, that. So I'm working with Kevin on that part. I haven't fully come to that to do the things that I find boring, actually. So I need to work on that. My wife said the same. You know, I wish that you could love cleaning the house, Eduardo. Yeah, but I'm training on that. And then I discovered mindfulness. My first encounter with mindfulness was Andre Krauss, actually, an amazing person, professor of vascular surgery, a survivor, actually, of a Japanese concentration camp. So you can imagine the healing he had to do, you know, after being a child in a concentration camp. It's horrible to even think all the things that happened to him and his mother, actually. So he was like the first one that got me into this. And after him, I came in contact with Kevin Reeder, my friend, my sensei, and I would say like the voice of science. And there's so many things that Kevin has to bring to companies, to high achievers like me, to propel them into, I would say, sustainability and growth. That is what Kevin had given me. Before I had growth at any means necessary, I burnt out. With Kevin, I have growth with sustainability, I could say. So what did I learn from Kevin? I will ask him and he will answer for us. And the first question to Kevin is, what is the function of the brain?
Well, I won't say what all the Americans say, great question, Eduardo, but it's a big question. It is. And I just want to pick up some threads from what you said. And also a thread from, there was a beautiful typo in one of your slides. And I don't know whether anyone else out there noticed it, but burnout in your slide had become born out. Oh. And I think which is much, much better than burnout, because burnout sounds like a very negative experience. And for sure, it's a tough experience. But for any of us, or any of you who are listening who have been through it, you know that a burnout comes from the burnout. And the burnout is that you, when you return, you are a different person.
Yeah.
You have a different skill set. You've learned more about yourself. You've done the inner journey as well as the outer journey. You in a way, you're a new, improved edition of yourself. So I thought that was beautiful that you, somehow your intuition had said, spell it burnout instead of burnout.
I have to just say that I'm actually Eduardo 2.0 now, actually, but it took me many years. It didn't, and I don't recommend anybody to do a burnout to become a better version of themselves.
No, I'm not doing that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Like you can talk with Kevin. He can help you without burning out. Don't do that. And the second thing I would like to say about what you just said is that this is the thing, right? There's a lot of stigma around also like labels around people, you know, like I have dysgraphia, that's the label that they gave me, that I have a spelling disorder. people and psychology, this is to all the psychologists listening, don't use these labels on people. Like, say you have a disability with like spelling, don't, the problem that all these labels that you have on people, like dyslexia or like like Asperger's, bipolar, and ADHD. The problem is that people start to stigmatize themselves when they get these labels, and they start to compare to other people. And this is what I found out from my research, is that you can't compare yourself to anybody with the same label, because it affects you so differently. Some people, they get advantage of it, some don't. Some people become they need a lot of help to function in society. Others, they prevail, they take over the society. So please stop using all these labels. You're just a human, and all these things that we have in our brain, like if I have spelling disorder, it's just part of us as nature. There is like no Superman, Superwoman. I never met one. And people that call themselves that I met in my life, they are not. Actually, I seen one of them burn out. And he said he was like the Superman of this world. Nobody is. We are just humans.
We are just humans, yeah. Certainly, we're not recommending going through burnout voluntarily. I don't think it happens that way. But crises in life are learning processes. That's for sure. We learn, or we don't stay around. You know, we sort of fail and we find another way of learning. But we continue learning, and crisis is a really good opportunity to do that, because usually we're put in that space where we don't know what next, as most of us are in that space at the moment through other things, through viruses and stuff. I wanted to go back to that thread of something where one of your very first slide, I said, underlined the importance of learning and knowledge, and how important that's been for your development. And a few nights ago, I went back and saw an old film, which reminded me that before computers were called computers, do you remember what they were called? The first computer was called a Turing machine, from Alan Turing, who was this guy who worked with a team during the Second World War to crack the Enigma code, which was the German way of coding their messages, which meant that the Allies couldn't understand what they were doing, even if they picked up their messages, which they did all the time. They worked for years on this, and he created this massive wall of circuits and slots and cards and things, which became the first computer, a Turing machine. But the thing is, it didn't crack the Enigma code until they put the human element in there, where they got some insight from one of the ladies who was typing up the messages that came through, and they came through in a sort of garbled sort of language, so they couldn't understand it, of course. But then they saw a pattern in that. She'd seen a pattern in this one person she was translating the messages from, and then they had human insight into the picture. And once they got the human insight in there, they threw out all the other stuff that this machine was trying to crunch down to break the code, and they just followed this one line of personal communication. And a couple of days later, they'd cracked the code. And apparently that saved hundreds of thousands of lives and shortened the Second World War by at least 3 years. So the importance of that knowledge, for you as a techie guy, Alan Turing, he understood that technology is one thing, like you were saying, but the human insight is really, really important.
So we're the only ones that can crack our own code then.
We are the caveman code. That's what Malcolm called it. Yeah. Are we going to crack the caveman code now? Is that where you're taking us?
I hope that. So I'm going to the next slide. Like the primary function, as you told me once, like explore and survive. That is, for me, it was such a revelation that when I realized like how primitive we are, like as humans, right? This was like, for me, was one of my first revelation already as a child, like how overestimate we humans do about ourselves, like our importance, or like we put ourselves on these pedestals, right? And a lot of people do that, and then they start to look down on other people that, according to them, are not on the same level, right? And I don't like that, because we're all, like I say, we're only humans. I treat everybody the same. If you're like the cleaner or the chairman of the board, for me that says nothing. I treat you like a human. Like how you act to other humans, that is how I will judge you, and that is how I will treat you, actually. So for me, the revelation when you told me about the thing about explore and survive, it kind of explains so much to me why I have this kind of thing, like the territorial Eduardo, that if you send Eduardo like like an angry mail or an knife and threaten, and then I need to like send something angry back, and I was like, what am I doing? That I asked myself the same question: why did I send that mail? And why am I so? But why was I so territorial about what I'm doing, right? And I was like, because I think I always preach togetherness. I always did that, but still I felt into the caveman so many times, and I couldn't figure it out until you explained to me, like we have a big reptile part on us on autopilot, and we're walking among other reptiles most of the times, right? If people did more mindfulness in their lives, I truly believe this. Like we will have less hate, less polarization, for sure. I truly believe it.
Good. We're on the same page there. Survive and explore. Yeah, I mean, Malcolm talked about the caveman as something that we should say no, no, no to. Now, being a mindfulness guy, I don't think so. I think, any resistance creates more resistance and takes us into negativity, which is the first and quickest part of the old reptile brain. And that was to keep us alive, and let's face it, it's been very, very, very good at that. We're sitting here today after I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years of our ancestors surviving. Hundreds of generations of our DNA has survived to enable us to sit here today. So just imagine what supreme survivors we are. We have all that DNA, while other people were dying around us from sickness, disease, lack of ability to adapt to climate or war or whatever it was. Our ancestors survived.
So the $1 million question I would say that the audience wants to hear from you is that when did we start kill each other when we went into each other's territory? And why what was the benefit of us, like when you enter my yard, I would not club you in your head, What propelled that change in us humans to start to understand that, oh, maybe we all belong together, oh, maybe we should collaborate, maybe I should not kill you for entering into my area?
That's another big question, yeah, and we'll get there along the way, I think. And what's worth saying first is that your inner reptile you were talking about that led you to behave in such ways in a certain manner, despite you having principles or ideals that would suggest the opposite. It's because of this. It's because that we're hardwired through all those millennia to survive first, and that's the fastest part of our brain. And
so survival is actually always the dominant factor of our lives, then?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The thing is, these days, a lot of the time, the things that trigger the reptile in us or the caveman in us, they're not real life threats. They're the boss who gives you the bad feedback. It's the bus driver who always treats you in a way where you want to shout back at him. It's all these sort of small irritations and things like that. Mostly,
Yeah,
at the moment we have
the
some
modern
real threats.
society that
in a
we
modern
live, right?
society, yeah. So yeah, the survival comes first. It's also sort of balanced by the explore, but the survival has to kick in first so that you find where you figure out whether it's safe or not. It's either sometimes, is it going to be, it's as simple as eat or be eaten, as I think Malcolm said. It's like, can I stick my head out of the cave? Is there something out there that's going to eat me? Or shall I stick my head out of the cave and I see something that I can eat? Once we've figured that out, then we know what to do next. We either explore, we go and see if we can kill that thing that's to eat, or we retire, hide away, because there's something out there that wants to eat me. So there's this sort of, survival kicks in first, and then you're able to understand the situation, and then you can explore or survive, take a step back.
And when I want to reflect on that, the thing with society and like how we interact with each other. Like, when I was in university, I remember that The Matrix came out, and we went to see that movie, and all my student colleagues, they were like looking at the effects, right? I was not, like a highly read person about everything about life, with everything I have read. I didn't do that. I started to look at the philosophy behind that. What are they trying to tell us? And I just, oh my God, I'm living in the Matrix. And when he said, do you want to take the blue pill or the red pill? I was like, that is what I need to do. I need to break out of the matrix of society. How can people live their life, work so hard just to be able to buy the shoes for I don't know, $2,000, that if that would make them a better human, and I think that's the first time I started to become more like Japanese, in a sense that I became more not so materialistic, all right? Because when I grew up, when I was a youth, I worked in a fashion clothes store for I saw diesel jeans, and I had all these fancy clothes, right? And I valued myself so high, and for other teen, they looked at me and oh, he's so cool, right? He has all. And when I watched The Matrix, for me it was this is something beyond the special effects that we're talking about here, because I think most people live that Matrix, right? They can't even grasp how insignificant all these material things around them are. What is the true value of them, And to be more hypocritical about it, I became one of the biggest mid-century design collectors in Norway, actually. So I have my whole house is full of this amazing design, lamps, design classics from this kind of period, 60s and 70s, But I don't see them as materialism. I see them as, for me, it's I collect these amazing designs, and I really value them, as a design, not because that, it's this thing, right, with this, it says Lacoste here or whatever. I could care less what people have today, I only look at the human inside. Thank you, Kevin. I will move on to the next question that I have for you. Another big revelation that I got from you was the 50-80 90.
Yeah, the journey inside, he said. We're sort of back to the caveman again here. This is our Neanderthal nervous system. And what we've ended up with, because this part of our brain was the first to develop and has been with us the longest, is that a lot of the time, and especially when we move fast, which we generally try to do in business and the workplace, is that what happens with us is that the caveman kicks in. And the caveman kicks in with, let's put it this way, if you're not attending to your mind, if you don't have a process for staying aware of how you're thinking and feeling, because thoughts and feelings sort of occur in a second or a microsecond and together. Basically what your mind is doing, it's got three main traits. It will wander, it will become negative in one way or another, and it will become repetitive. This is the autopilot. So 50% of the time, when they've researched this with neuroscience, 50% of the time we're actually distracted. So that's the wandering side of it. This is on average, but
that's when I'm programming, or I'm doing some architecture, and then somebody comes, hey, Eduardo, let's go for a coffee.
Yeah, or they don't need to come to you because you're starting to think, oh, now I need that coffee. It's been 10 minutes since I've had coffee, and what sort of coffee? And then you're off, you're somewhere else, even though you still think you're sitting there doing your coding, but you're not. So half of the time we think we're focused on something, we're generally not. And then 80% of the time, you'll find that because of the speed of that survival strand in our DNA, then we're negative in one way or another. We're critical, self-critical, we're judging, those type of things. So
most people would like refer it as being negative, right?
Yeah, we have a definite bias, as Malcolm was talking about. A negative bias is just hot-wired into our minds, and that's why I say there's no point in for me to shout no to the caveman, because you're just feeding the negativity. So for me, it's like, yes, caveman, but yes, you're here again, but I see you.
So don't worry, be happy. The song is actually that's like, you can't do that. You need to train on your positivity, right? You need to be mindful all the time to not be negative. Correct?
Right.
So that song doesn't work. Like, don't worry, be happy. Like, I love that song. I think that's a good goal to have in life, to be able to live that song most of our time, but we need to work for that. We can't just sing the song and now we're like positive minded, right?
Right. And that brings us to the third number here, which is the 90, and that is that the research shows that 90% of the time we think we're doing something that's in front of us, where our mind is running on pure repetition. So the thoughts that are running through it with the feelings that are attached to them are the same as yesterday. So if you're doing your coding, how creative can you be when 80% of you is doing the same as yesterday? So you've only 20% creativity left in your mind. And this is for people of our age, like, or maybe my age, but sort of getting to 50, around 40, 50 plus, we're at 80% repetition, 20% creativity. If you turn it around in the 5 to 10 age group, it's the opposite. So your children are 80% creative. Their thoughts are just like new. I've done that before. But it's 8-2. It's the opposite way around.
This is the thing that I have so hard time with, is that when companies like big corporates, they start like an innovation department, and we're going to hire some innovative people, right? They need to know psychology before they do that, because we're like Kevin said, like our brain is quite repetitive. Like we're thinking almost the same thoughts every day. It's very new things that we come up with, you could say. It's quite repetitive, right? So I truly believe that this is so important for companies to understand. Like mindfulness as a strategy is about psychology, to learn how the brain works, learn how people are, because what the most important thing we need to do now, because we're now in a paradigm shift. Things will go faster, like the digital world as we know it. When people talk about like disruption, I'm like, there's no disruption. It's part of the nature. That's the nature of the digital world that we live in. Companies call it a disruption because they are threatened by it, because they are not adaptable enough. And that is what we need to do. We need to create a growth and an adaptability mindset of the whole company. I would say everybody in the company must be able to be more lean, be more agile, to be able to understand like all the things as Kevin are talking about, to be able to have more positivity in the company, because that is so important for creativity. It's so important for company culture. So yeah, that was.
I know you get it, Eduardo. I know you get it, and it is down to that, really. It's as simple as, how do we retrain ourselves out of this impasse that we've got into with the 50, 80, 90 part of our brains? Well, we need to slow down. The first thing we need, it's a bunch of C's, really. We can say we need calm and we need compassion, or we need to slow down and we need kindness. And they're just the antidotes to what we've got up here, is to slow down, is to stop the mind wandering and using all our energy like in stuff that we're not really interested in and we're not focused on, don't want to focus on. And the kindness is the antidote to the negativity. So you have to be kind to the caveman when he pops up and starts to be critical of you and others, and just think, hi, here you are again, nice to see you, but don't need to listen at the moment, because I know this guy is good and I'm doing good work and I don't need to listen to you. So you've got to bring in that calmness and compassion. And the other C word that brings up then is clarity. Once you're calm enough and you're kind enough, then you suddenly you see things much more clearly. And that brings up two other C's then, which you end up, when you see things clearly, you can make really conscious choices, really wise choices, and you can be really creative. You can go back to being the 5 to 15-year-old or 5 to 10-year-old who's 80% creative. And that's what happens when you slow down enough and you're kind enough to yourself and others, even in the workplace. It turns around the whole reptile brain and allows the rest of our consciousness to start to come into play, our intuition and our listening skills for other people's intuition and insight and all the other knowledge that's locked out when we're going too fast and being too negative.
I did a nugget about it, actually. I wrote something like, sometimes I need to slow down to be able to go faster. But actually, I should have wrote to move faster, actually, because I don't need to go more faster than I go. Then I don't know what will happen, actually. I'm like Speedy Gonzalez. I'm doing all these things at the same time, actually. So, but this is the thing that for me is so important about the work that you do, Kevin, is that I wish that more companies would wake up, because we're in a paradigm shift, as I say, and what you're talking about is like facts, research is like nothing. It's nothing that we're like one. Let's sit and sing "Kumbaya, my lord" in the company, right? You're not talking about that. You're talking about like reality, and we need to have more positivity. And that comes to my final question for you. Is regarding this is so what is well-being actually about? And before that is like teamwork. I know you said some numbers to me, and that this is so important one to get.
Yeah, 50 to 70, we've got lots of numbers here, haven't we? Maybe we can start with the middle one of the triplet there. The psychological safety is what I was talking about when we were talking about popping your head out of the cave. Is it safe enough? And once it's safe enough, then you can go to explore mode rather than the survive mode. And that's been described and validated again and again by research. And Google research especially. I mean, a few years ago, they decided that they were going to find out how to create top performing teams. And I mean, all the research before then said that most teams fail to reach their goals 50 to 70% of the time. We're failing to reach the goals that we've defined for teams.
Because
we go to these old mindsets, we repeat things, we try to solve problems with the same mind that we've failed at solving problems before. All these things kick in, and they kick in with other people, because unless we feel safe, we're back to the reptile mind again. That kicks in with us, So we have to create somehow this psychological safety in teams as a core sort of pillar of how they operate. And that's what Google's Aristotle program showed. They followed 180 different teams in detail, researched them over a long period of time in their network. And they found that was the key factor to improve team performance, was create psychological safety so that people can feel unafraid to share their ideas, are willing to listen to other people's ideas, bring that kindness in there, slow down a little so that there's space for the intuition to suddenly kick in, all those things. And they said, they broke down psychological safety, which was the headline, into all these different ways of creating norms for a team. They said it was all about team norms. And if you create that psychological safety, then this 50 to 70 is the old news. And one of the other things, stories I heard from a Google mindfulness trainer, because they've been doing mindfulness awareness training in the workplace for a couple of decades at least now, and researching it as Google do, and was what you talked about with making leaps somehow, these leaps forward in an understanding. They pitted teams against each other. They put a team of brilliant people, set them goals, a team of sort of brilliant people, and set them the same goals, and they ran them in parallel. The second team were run through the mindfulness training program that they have at Google, and they continued as a team to practice awareness techniques together. And what happened when they saw how these two teams ran in parallel towards the same type of goals was that the first team went faster to begin with. They were going quick, quick, quick. They were going survive, survive, survive. Sometimes they were going compete, 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 and they went faster. What happened with the second team, they slowed down because of their mindfulness practice that brought in kindness, calm, and those things. And then at one point, something weird happened. The second team jumped a long way ahead of team one. And then team one, run, 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 like the hare in Winnie the Pooh books, is busy back soon, catching up. And then the tortoise, when they got there, made another quantum leap. And then team one never caught team two again. So what was happening there was this paradox of like slowing down to speed up, as you were saying. So they slowed down to the point where they could access all the other knowledge and insights that we have. Every second we can handle a few megabytes of information that's coming in through all my senses, all my learning from the past, everything you're saying. I can handle a few megabytes of that every second in my working brain. But there's gigabytes of information going in through all my senses all the time. Do I get access to that? Not if I'm running like the busy back soon rabbit. Only when I slow down to a little bit of tortoise pace occasionally. Doesn't need to be more than 4 deep breaths. And then suddenly I access all that because it's been stored in this hard disk, which is my body. I have access to that. It comes up as intuition.
I love how you use how you compare like the brain, the body, like with these terms, because then people like me can we can relate to that, right? It's much easier to relate, like when we talk about the brain, like the computer and all these kind of things. And we need to get somebody from Google. What's the name of the program?
The Aristotle program was the one they ran with the teams. Yeah.
I will get one from that team to come and speak here with Kevin. I love that story. I want to know more about that research. Mm-hmm. And we're running out of time now, so I have a final slide for you, Kevin. What is well-being?
Well, I think if you click one slide back, then well-being is sustainable culture for me. We can click back, click to your final one again. Basically, all the training that I'm involved in is to bring about behavioral change and cultural change. And the building blocks of that are awareness. We might call it mindfulness, or you might call it clarity or attention or focus. But it's basically training ourselves so that we can live with the caveman, but we can be a 21st century Eduardo or Kevin. So we have enough awareness to see what is happening in our mind and emotionally and otherwise, and we can access all that information by making wise choices and slowing down. The other fundament is positivity, to have an equalizer for all that natural negativity that's hot-wired to us. When we bring awareness and positivity into our lives, our behavior and our teams, then we have what I would call a sustainable culture, something that supports our own individual development and allows us all to go a step further and make a leap so that we don't destroy the world we're living in, so that we do, make sure that our children and the next generation can have a good life.
This was such an amazing episode. Malcolm, Larry, listening because you're not here anymore on the show. So, but Kevin Reader, like any high achiever out there, like me, like leader, entrepreneur, or whatever you define yourself at, do you want to propel to the next level? These are the two gentlemen you should contact. If you're a company, I'm a big believer of good to great. Like Jim Collins, for me, that's almost like the coming of Christ, you could say. When I read that book, Good to Great, it was so many things that I thought that was confirmed in that book. And what I'm talking about now is that how do you go from like great to amazing. That is what I want to do. I don't want to I want to go beyond great. I want to create amazing. How do we do that? And I think that if you're thinking in these terms, this is the two persons you should contact, Malcolm and Kevin. And even if you're in the good phase, or even if maybe even more if you're not even in the good phase, I would say, how do we get started to build a more positive, a more sustainable, a more empowering company? Kevin and Malcolm, any day of the week, I would say. Contact them on LinkedIn and look in the description. You will find the contact details there. Thank you so much, Kevin, for everything. I would say, for being in my life, for being my sensei of all this amazing knowledge. Without you, I don't know where I would have been today. Actually, you have propelled me to a whole other level. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Yeah, this was amazing. Bye, everybody.
Lean on me, yeah.